So hello and welcome to the Queer Heritage and Collections Network screening of Our House by English Heritage Shout Out Loud, along with the National Youth Theatre and METRO Charity. So as the co-founder of Queer Britain, a charity working to establish a national queer museum, I'm really excited and struck by the importance of the film and immersive theatre piece that you're about to get a first peek of. Queer people have often been obscured from the heritage record. This really helps put our communities back where we deserve to be, right at the heart of things. And it does that in an almost ineffably innovative, playful and queer way. Sounds queer to me anyway. Our House was originally a site-specific immersive theatre piece exploring the history of Eltham Palace and the lives that passed through it. It was devised entirely by under 25-year-olds from the LGBTQ Charity METRO and the National Youth Theatre, and explores the rich and deep history of Eltham Palace and sincerely works to restore queer people to the spaces that they always truly belong to, but sadly were often unacknowledged. The film that we're about to show gives you an intimate look at the process behind this immersive project, which won the 2020 UK Heritage Award for the Best Exhibition and Festival or event. Now, after we've seen the film, we're going to ask a few questions of our panelists, and we really want you to be putting your burning questions to them in the chat window. Now, first of all, I'd like to, before we watch the film, I'd like to introduce you to our beautiful, fantastic, energetic and just wonderful panelists today. So I'm going to go through this in alphabetical order without fear nor favour. And so I'm very, very pleased that we have with us Dr. Dominique Bouchard, the Head of Learning and Interpretation at English Heritage, where she leads on exhibitions and interpretation, learning, publishing, digital curation, contemporary art, and the National Youth Engagement Programme, Shout Out Loud, which frankly makes me feel exhausted and like I'm an underachiever. She's also a trustee of the William Morris Society and the former director of the Outburst Queer Arts Festival. I'm very pleased to have Queen Isabella themselves, sometimes called the She-Wolf of France, played by the wonderful Jules Bethley, who's an all-round creative with a passion for the performance and visual art, from acting to sculpting. Now, they use their art to express their experiences as a queer mixed race person and to centre and honour queer people of colour and Black people. I'm very, very pleased that Jules could join us today. Then we have, royalty. We have Edward II, played by the wonderful cast member Jamie Cottle, who is a trans femme, non-binary, interdisciplinary artist. Currently, they're writing and performing poetry, and I'm particularly fascinated to see a trans-led production of Hamlet set in a swimming pool. And I'm also a bit disappointed that we're past Christmas, because they also make a line of handcraft soft toys they call bio teddies. Really is a shame, because that would be my Christmas sorted. Then we have the Associate Director of the National Youth Theatre, Anna Niland. Now, Anna oversees their talent development programmes and has worked extensively as an actor on stage, screen and radio. Anna was a creative director on Shout Out Loud, which was an award-nominated queer-themed site-specific show at Eltham Palace, created in partnership with English Heritage, Queer Heritage and Collections Network. And we also have the wonderful Benjamin Salmon, writer on this project and an award-winning playwright and actor, trained as an actor at the National Youth Theatre and as a playwright at the Soho Theatre's Writer Lab programme. Now, Ben was recently recognised by Sister Pictures and Olivia Colman's South of the River Pictures commendation list of emerging writer performers who could be offering fresh and exciting work to the UK television landscape for 2021 and beyond. So we're really excited to be able to get a glimpse of this fresh, exciting talent, this exciting moment in their artistic life. So you're a wonderful panel. I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions, but let's watch the film.
I am temple for womanhood, closet for man. I am trinkets and embellishments with ownership presumed. I am moat unfinished, wide blind spot, a target. I was palace, then hall, then ransacked by military, taunted with violence, framed as education. I am bombed and burnt and spat on by children. So tear up your tickets and instead tour my form. I am queer space.
My name's Kane Husbands and I directed this piece called Shout Out Loud. It's a site-specific promenade piece in Eltham Palace, which is a heritage site with English heritage. And we've been working with an LGBTQ+ community and some MYT members to animate some of the stories that came about from the history of this building.
My name's Jamie Cottle. I use they, them pronouns.
I'm playing King Edward II.
So the Eltham Palace project is essentially going to be an immersive theatre experience through Eltham Palace, focusing on the untold stories, the queer stories, and also our stories. Yeah? How can we inject our stories into Eltham Palace?
Where history is like a timeline of events, of things occurring around places, heritage is the energy within a space and the feelings that people and events create within it. It's the connection. That's heritage.
So by doing things like this, it is just inclusive and representative, and it's truth. It's owning the queer stories that came with this site. I'm a Black Asian queer woman, and I've got to play a powerful, white, famous, homophobic queen. Her husband, Edward II, had an affair with a man, Piers Gaveston.
You're looking older today, Gaveston.
What?
Yeah, the way you hold yourself.
The way I hold myself? Do I hold myself well? Oh, badly?
No, not a bad way, just well done.
Great. Thank you, Your Majesty.
You're welcome.
Your Majesty, what would you be if you could be anything?
If I weren't king, you mean?
Yeah, if you could choose to be anything, what would you choose?
Well, I sometimes wish that I were normal.
Oh, sorry.
But you asked the question.
Yeah, I know.
That's my answer.
Yeah, that's such a stupid answer.
Don't laugh at it.
It's funny, though.
Normal's good.
Edward, I love that you're not normal. I think you're very useful, Edward.
Pierce, if you knew you could succeed at anything, what would it be?
It'd be telling you that I love you.
Isabella? Is it over? He's never spoken to me like that. They never did that to me, so...
That was Gaveston, wasn't it?
Yes. Edward's favourite. Or more than Edward's favourite.
I could see that.
Some things are just too hard to relive.
What we're trying to do with this story is to show that these people are just like us and were just like us. To meet the characters, not just to see them walk onto a stage and walk off. It gives an almost more immediate and a closer connection to this story and these characters and these people.
Mainstream history, what often gets told are stories about kings and queens, very rich people, people who exist, whose lives are very well documented, but that's really a fraction of the history and heritage and stories of the lives of people who lived in the world.
And doing this, we're kind of like filling in the blanks. And we're taking what we know to be authentic and putting it in and punching them back in so that you can see the full story, so that you can get a feel for what they actually were and who they really were.
Well, when I'm with you, you make me feel like I'm naked in the middle of the road, completely vulnerable, completely completely like, how the hell did it get here? Naked on the road. Sort of made me feel like that.
That's horrible.
Don't worry, it's not.
Are you sure? Because what you just said sounds horrific.
It feels scary.
Yeah, because it sounds scary.
Like, nervous maybe, but really lovely.
Lucy? Yes, my lady?
Be a darling and see to the drawing room.
Yes, of course, my lady.
This isn't happening. Collect your things.
These people, these real life people, were never heard, and it feels like it's our responsibility to finally give them a voice and to empower ourselves to have our own voices.
All young people who are queer, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what their experiences are right now, I think it's really important that all of them are part of uncovering that history.
Meeting everybody, all of these different people of different cultures and races and sexualities and genders, I've learnt so much.
When you're working with somebody who might not think of themselves as an actor, working with people from Metro Zest, actually a lot of the work they produce is really, really, really strong and really inspiring.
Henry VIII was the last monarch to spend substantial time here. He spent most of his childhood here, which is why they picked me. I'm the youngest here.
Your worship. He's being prepared for the hardships of being king. Is he prepared to be a man, is what I'm asking you.
Is he on his way? Bishop, unpack that basket immediately. Mary, did you pack everything in there? The teddy bear? Check. The bouncy balls? Check. The trumpet? Check. And the flute? Mary, you forgot the flute! I can kill you! Now, ladies and gentlemen, please collect yourselves. The little boy who's about to arrive might be small, but he is, in fact, Prince Henry, future King of England.
I'm here!
Henry!
Where's my flute?
Well, you see, Henry, someone forgot to put it in the basket.
Debbie!
I'm not quite sure that's necessary.
With her head.
Or instead, then catch the bishop, who's so much slower than I am.
No, don't do that, please.
Actually, one of the great things about history is that the stories are just really exciting if they're told in the right way and really compelling. It's a human impulse to be able to relate to what came before. We don't just emerge from nowhere.
And I think it's been incredibly powerful for our young people who don't necessarily hear about their queer history through school or through different places where they might access history, to see that actually these kind of spaces do have a really amazing history and that they're part of that, to be able to know that you're not alone within your present and you're also not alone within your past as well.
Can imagine the worlds, this gorgeous Art Deco space that was designed by two male lovers. The Edward II Great Hall. It's a mix match of different styles, which I think as queer people we sort of gravitate towards. It feels right that we're doing this project because we're actually getting to show queer people in a queer space.
When there are people who are growing up not knowing that the kings of this country have been just like them, then of course they're going to feel alienated and feel like they're not welcome in their own country, in their own spaces, when really that should never be the case.
For the young people to take ownership of that space and ownership that this building belongs to them. This building has now had its identity reunited to it in a way that I think it's probably been erased.
We do not demolish. We recognize complexity and we build outwards, decorated in decadence. Bitter and bruised, you are not allowed to touch us. No one ever gets to touch us. So tear off your tickets and instead tour our halls. We are queer space.
I want to sort of create a piece of theatre which makes the people that feel unwelcome and that feel like English heritage sites aren't for them, it's actually their right to be there, because these sites aren't just also for us. In this case, they are designed for us and by us.
so slow, it takes my feeble mind, and I'm waiting impatient for something to come around. Did you know I was there? Did you know what I needed? How long did I stand in the garden with my breath against the leaves as the trees bowed down and weeds would gather round my legs up to my knees? How
Well, first of all, I personally found that very, very moving, beautiful, inspiring, and I think more than anything, it just makes me remember just how much I've missed getting out into the world, into these beautiful spaces with beautiful people, exploring ideas and inhaling some decent culture. I'd like, first of all, I'm wondering if I could talk to Anna for a moment, and I'd like to really address, I think my first question to you is, I wonder if you might speak a little bit about the background on the piece. I'm thinking really about what the process for the National Youth Theatre creative teams were. Maybe a few words about how it was developed with the young people from Metro, particularly around the ideas of sort of co-creation and participation.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, even just watching that back, just sort of, it's really moving. It was an extraordinary project. And I think because the process was so special, and I think the process was special because it was a mixture of working with young people from Metro Zest and working with a group of queer NYT members who joined forces with a brilliant creative team with Ben and Kane Husbands and the Pappy Show and Tristan and Jude to create this spectacular piece of work. And it wasn't something that was written before we got in the room. The whole principle around this project was that it was developed with and for the young voices that we were telling the stories about. And as was articulated in the film, of course, it was about the historical figures. That's really important that we retold some of those stories, but it was a launch pad for everybody involved in the project to engage and tell their story and how they felt to be in that space, and also how relevant that space could be for them. So the process was delicate, it was safe. It was really important that it was a safe space, because for a lot of young people coming into that space, they'd never been in a play before, and doing theatre wasn't something that they were used to, and also being in an environment where, as an organisation and as a culture of NYT, we always set up safe spaces by check-ins and check-outs, and allowing people to be who they want to be in that space, and choose what they want to be called, and feel within the time that we're there that they can be whatever they want to be, and that takes time and trust. So over a period of I mean, we began working with some of the NYT and some of our creative team with Metro Zest first, to begin working and developing and talking to them about what this project might be and whether they would like to come along with us. And then we got into the space with the NYT members, and it's always infectious. Theatre is extraordinary in the way that it creates this kind of infectious, safe, well, I hope, you know, in most theatres, but especially the work we do at the National Youth Theatre, it's tantamount that it's really safe and caring, and that it's a space for people to be who they want to be. So an extraordinary process, I would say. I could go on forever, but I'll pause there.
Well, I mean, and that's really interesting as well, because it feels like it creates that opportunity for people to really actually explore themselves, using this as a lens about what it means to be themselves, using this history.
Yeah, it was certainly life-changing for many participants, and hopefully for some of the audience, I think won't ever be forgotten. And I don't say that lightly when I say life-changing in theatre. I think, you know, I think it truly, when you get projects like this that are much more than a proscenium arch and a curtain. They embody a space, and they embodied the young people and the creative team for a long time, and I'm sure both Jules and Jamie and Ben and Dominic will say the same, I hope.
Well, actually, and actually, if I could move on to Dominic, there's I think it's very interesting to, coming from English heritage, I wonder what it means as queer people to be able to kind of re-queer a space that was kind of already queer to begin with. It's kind of that kind of queer reclamation. And why does that matter? Why does that matter both, I think, actually, first of all, for you personally, and also, why does that matter to the organisation?
I'm going to start with the organization bit, because I think for us, we're a conservation charity. And that means that we look after and preserve these places that were important in terms of England's history. And our collection isn't anywhere close to being complete. And really, it's not even a particularly good lens, actually, to think about a kind of a comprehensive approach to telling the history of what happened in England. But we want to be preserving the histories of these places. Some of those histories are very easy to access because they've either been etched into a wall, sometimes through graffiti, sometimes we've got brilliant documents, and sometimes they've been erased or suppressed, sometimes, for all manner of reasons. Some of them, more nefarious than others. And part of conservation is exploring and unpacking and excavating these histories. And sometimes that means kind of trying to work against the sources that are trying to hold them and keep those stories in there to release them. And that means that as an act of conservation, this is part of what history is. This is part of what conservation is. This is part of what heritage is. And this is absolutely a core part of what we do as an organization. Conservation and education are actually our two primary missions. From on a personal level, I'm not from the UK. I've lived here for the last 20 years or so, but it's not my story. So I haven't really, working in museums and the way that I haven't necessarily worked on stories that have been incredibly personal to me. And this one is really personal. I don't have any British or ancestry or English ancestry at all. But I feel a connection to Eltham Palace because of this amazing piece of work that all of these incredible young people created. They created this personal bridge between past and present that didn't just work for them. It works for everyone. And I think that telling queer stories is really important for queer people. And I certainly, get a lot out of it, but I think it enriches everyone's history. The history of queer people, the history of all groups whose stories have been marginalized or are not told in mainstream ways or sort of conventional ways. Telling these stories makes everybody's connection to the past stronger and richer and more vibrant. So I think it's important for queer people, but it's also important for everybody.
And also, I guess that everybody who's either been in the audience or that's been involved in creating the piece, their stories are now folded into the history of the palace as well.
Absolutely. The Eltham Palace has been around since about 1088 in some form or other. But it lives today because people visit it, and the memories that people make while visiting these heritage sites, whether it's Eltham or Stonehenge or anywhere, that's part of Eltham's story. And we've been able to make this mark on Eltham's story in a way that's really, I think, inspiring and that is really meaningful. And I think that these sites, they don't sort of come into our ownership to die. Our purpose is to bring them to life. And that means that they have to continuously be interpreted and reinterpreted so that they can maintain their relevance and so that we can, understand the role that they play in the world today. And I think that Eltham's story has been uplifted by this experience that it's had.
And I think as well, I mean, and actually, if I could direct this to Benjamin, in terms of those people's stories being folded in, and about how important it is for queer people to tell their stories, particularly when those stories have been perhaps damped down, should we politely put it, over the years. And I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about just actually how this piece was written. And I'm interested as well to understand how tightly did you cleave to history? How much were people sort of bringing to it? Talk a little bit about that sort of process.
Well, you know, it was quite overwhelming, the writing of it, to be perfectly honest. I remember getting an email from Anna about this project, and it sounded remarkable. And it's one of those things that you say yes to immediately because you're like, this is incredible. But it's sort of the thing where afterwards you're like, oh my God, this is terrifying. How am I going to do this? Because like, it just felt as well before we were in the rehearsal room. And as Anna said, like, you know, none of it was written. The whole kind of style of the project, you know, it's a collaboration. So, you know, even though I did write the play, it was about seeing who we had in the room. But then also, as you say, there's the history to consider, and it was overwhelming, you know, how, because I'm not a historian. I'm not, you know, we aren't just telling history. We sort of are, but also, yeah, and also you're also left with the things of, well, we don't know what these people said, you know, there's a bit of guesswork. And I guess that was the major thing that was in my head the entire process. You know, I think it's a real shame that as queer people, really, there is history there, as I've said, but there's also really not, you know, there's so much about us that isn't written down. And, you know, one could think that being queer was a 20th century invention, and it wasn't, you know, but to approach the writing of it, a lot of it came from just spending a lot of time in the palace. But I remember coming into the rehearsal room a week late as well. So the company had been like together a week, and we just started making things. And it was really strange because it seemed at first the history wasn't the big focus. What was the big focus was everyone just being able to release their queer identity. I think that can't be really drilled home hard enough. Like, it's very rare as a queer person to just feel that safety and that acceptance with one another. And it was a beautiful thing. And that was the inspiration for writing these characters. You know, okay, I can read a book about Queen Isabella. I can read a book about King Edward. But for example, Jules and Jamie, who played those characters, gave me so much in, you know, devising exercises, improvisation exercises that were set for them. And that's how I guess I was able to write the characters. But it was like factory farm, you know, I don't want to say like it was a beautiful process, yeah, but it was also me just like hunched over a laptop going, here's a scene, and then hearing it said out loud and then thinking, okay, that doesn't work, and how is that going to fit in with this other storyline in the 1600s or the 1200s and whatever. So, you know, to answer your question a bit more directly, I guess I sort of just lost my mind, and in my head it was just, how are all of these different storylines going to end up at the end point? And the answer to that question was the young people. You know, yes, it is a play about where we've come from and writing a play about our ancestors, but the ultimate journey of the play, and for my process as the writer, was how does that inform now? How can we best support ourselves as excellent queer people? How can we thrive in a world that sometimes tells us that we're not allowed to thrive in? How can we get there? By looking back, as I think Dominique was talking about so beautifully. So that was a bit of a ramble. I hope I've made some sense there. Apologies.
I think that actually really actually perfectly answered what I was interested about. And I'm interested to hear you talking about really kind of the power of spending time in the actual sort of physical place. And actually, I'd like to bring Jules into this question, this next kind of question, which is that there's something very powerful about being excluded from spaces as well as being able to take up a space and inhabit a space that may not naturally be somewhere that we've felt welcomed to in the past. And I'm just thinking in terms of the sort of performance that you were conducting as Queen Isabella. How did it feel to actually be in that space and say, I deserve to be here. I deserve to take up this space. I belong here. This is my space. And no one can tell me not to be. Maybe talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, the experience for me was very intense, as I imagine it was for everyone involved, because I personally feel very disconnected from the idea of English heritage and from the idea of monarchs and like the palace, and that is like so far from what I come from and from what I've learned about myself. But at the same time, queerness and my queerness is a massive part of my identity, and it's a massive part of how I navigate my life. And to be in that situation and have that gap kind of bridged was weird, but also welcomed, of course. Like it was very like, okay, so I'm in this palace and I feel very out of place, but I'm with all these other queer people and queer actors, and actors, like, we bond and we mesh anyway because we have to be very vulnerable with each other. And then on top of that, we have this common thing in our identity, which is queerness. And I don't know about everyone else, but I had never been surrounded by that many queer people outside of a club. Like, that was the first time that I'd been around people that I could actually identify with. So that gave me comfort in the space. That gave me the push to kind of start asking questions about myself, really, because even though I was like, yeah, I'm queer, I'm going to do this play, doing this project, being at Eltham Palace and meeting everyone else started making me really think about my place in the community and my place, like, as someone who's queer, but who's Black, who's Asian, who's working class, who's all these things about me that equally make up who I am, and my presence in a space like that is powerful, to be honest. And that gave me a lot of, as well. I was like, yeah, I feel like out of place, and I feel weird also because at the time I was also like way in the closet. I was in Narnia with my family, so it was like outside of my family space. I was very out, but I was still having that conversation as well. So it was like all these things, but it really like kick-started this conversation in myself and made me think, like, this in itself, the fact that I'm here in this room, in this hall, like, this wouldn't have happened in the time that we're talking about, when Queen Isabella was really there, like, like, it wouldn't have happened. So what I really felt was potential, and like the potential, like, if this is what we're doing now, what's going to happen in the next 100 years? Like, how far can we push it? Like, how can we put more and more people who are far from what English heritage is in those spaces, so we can reclaim those spaces, so we can like reclaim these stories that have been, taken away from us. And even though me, like, I wouldn't ever exist in that space in the old, like, back, but I exist there now. And that's a testament to like what this whole thing is like, it's the potential. It's like we're pushing for more. And yeah, I don't know, I'm rambling too, but yeah, it's just all of these things that yeah, it's just, yeah, it was intense, but it was definitely like, Anna, you're right, it was life-changing. It really was, because it was like a kickstart of all this feeling of like, this is possible. What else is now? Like, what next?
I love the sound of that kind of transformative. The word that keeps coming to my head there is about kind of increased confidence and sense of self within a community, in a sense of kind of again, coming back to that idea of it being right to take your space, and no one can tell us not to. And almost, correct me if I'm wrong, but just the idea of inhabiting that particular character's life as a way of being able to kind of like blow your own life open. And I just absolutely I love that idea. And actually, if I could bring Jamie into this next question, which is sort of it feeds on, which is the idea that if this is how a cast member was feeling about their interaction with this performance, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how audience reactions, Jamie, had helped shape and change the performance, and what your experience of actually engaging with the audience was.
So in terms of dealing with the audience, it was twofold, because we had one showing which was for an invited audience, and that was really amazing. That was there were loads and loads of people who were keenly interested in what it meant to tell queer stories, and that feeding off of that energy I found that really useful when I was actually performing. There's a piece towards the end of the play, I think it finishes the play, where and you heard some of it in the documentary, I think, which is one of my poems, and it's me sort of reclaiming the space and sort of shouting basically in this hall that Edward was coronated in, and basically saying, this is my space and we are the space. Us as queer people, we are the space. And feeding off of the people in the room and seeing them react to that and seeing themselves find place at the same time that I was finding myself within that space was really, really invigorating from a performance perspective. And it made me feel like the work that we were doing was like useful and radical work. I think that was something that was really important to me throughout the whole project, was that it felt like work that was needed. It felt like work that was about time. It's kind of like how the work felt. And yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about like, some people have already mentioned about like erasure and stuff like that, and how to sort of play with history, because part of our audience were also people who were there just to see Eltham Palace that day, and they were just there to see the history, right? And so in terms of a conversation around how do we interpret history, and how do we play with history as actors, as creatives, and as queer people, I think it's really important to see that erasure isn't something that just happens. It's something that happens by force, and that is something that I think actually often is a violent action. It's a violent action of force. And so when we react to that history, it's important that we don't step on eggshells. We don't try and not offend, I think, sometimes with the way of how much we play with history, because history's already been played with. I've been played with in history. History is played with me, it is played with my ancestors. So I've already been played with. The game's already started, and I'm ready to play. Okay, so so it's important that when we then create work, we're allowed to inject ourselves into that work, because we've been taken out of that work by force. And so I think that was sometimes difficult for an audience to be hit with. As a trans person, that was something that, you know, I have to deal with. People react, an audience, every time I leave the house, right? Every time I leave the house, I have to deal with an audience that sees me, and sometimes they don't react in the best way. So it's something I'm used to, but it's something that needs to happen for change to happen, for progressive change to happen. The audience needs to see this, and they're welcome for seeing it, because, you know, yeah, because of this. So, you know, I think the audience was sometimes they would get hit with things that they weren't expecting to see, but that is what this work needed to do. It needed to have people see stories that they hadn't seen before that have always been there. So yeah.
And there were any challenging reactions or unexpected reactions that you encountered?
I think, well, I think there were sometimes we, like, because of the nature of the production, because it was Promenade, it meant that, like, sometimes people literally were, like, you know, walking through the space and didn't want to see a play that day. Then that always happens, right? You know, like whether or not it was a queer play or not, sometimes people just weren't expecting to see a play that day. And so, yeah, you did get people like, you know, walking through, ignoring the fact that you were clearly declaring your love to someone and just like talking over it. But like those reactions are useful too, actually, I think, because like, you know, it's if we're opening up the space to be played with, then we can't say, you know, us as actors, we get to take the space, but you as audience members, you don't, you know. They are people too, and this space is theirs too. So yeah, I think those reactions are important too, you know. Take it as you will. Yeah.
I love that idea of which is, there's something particularly beautifully queer about that idea of taking a historical slow motion violence, sometimes slow motion violence, sometimes actually not slow motion, but taking that violence and responding to it with conversation and playfulness and a sort of defiance in that, I think is really beautiful. Now, I'm aware that we are kind of, time has just been absolutely galloping, and I'm wondering if I can bring Dan Vo into this conversation now, because I think that you maybe have been looking for the questions that people have been leaving in the chat.
I have been.
I'm wondering if there's...
Yeah, there's a few questions, and I think the first one here is probably best to go to Ben. It is from Jessie Sheeher, who says that, who asks rather, was there a dramaturg involved in the writing process at all?
Probably not formally, but I have to say Anna Niland was my parent during this, for sure. I remember me and Anna sat down with the script in a really not formal way, but definitely like we sat down and we literally just interrogated that script from a dramaturg sort of eye. So Anna was invaluable in that sense, and it gave me so much clarity, because you get to that point, any writers who are watching this, you'll know that you get to a point where it just needs to be seen by someone else, and it needs to be seen by someone who is, you know, a fair critic in that sort of sense. So Anna was invaluable, as was Kane Husbands, the director, the entire Pappy Show team. But I guess the other dramaturg in a way was the young people. Like, I remember the first bits of script, I think I referenced in my other answer as well, like, you know, it was quick. It was like, okay, type this, print it off, let's give it to the young people. And then hearing that, because hearing them say it out loud just gave me so many notes. You know, you immediately know that's not working, this is working. I remember the first time that happened, we read out the epilogue, so sort of like the final battle cry to our audience, the last moment of the play. And, you know, I can't say it enough, the young people kind of just gave us everything we needed to get the job done as the creative team. It was invaluable. But I also do have to thank Anna Niland, because there was a lot of propping me up when I needed it. So yes.
Amazing, thank you. Now let's stay with the young people then. Meg has sent in a message that says that, and I think a lot of people agree with this, obviously, you know, this is a beautiful project, and I'm reading streams of brilliant, that was great, you know, everyone has been really touched by this. But staying with Jules and Jamie for a moment, and we'll go in that order, Jules and Jamie, what are the future projects that you've got in mind in the future?
Trying to find the mute button on mute. Like personal projects, or like...
What have you got? We want to know everything that you're doing.
Okay, well, I very much so, like in 2020, definitely through the pandemic, I was learning what's important to me. And what's important to me is giving back to the community and giving back to the people who have made me who I am. And I think definitely I've still been emailing some of the younger people at Metro, because like we made like it literally like my younger siblings, like literally like that bond. Yeah, I miss them a lot, but I hope that we're doing okay. But I want to be incorporating what my love is, which is movement, which is performance. And in the future, I'm looking to create a healing space for queer people of colour especially, because I know that, look, as queer people, there is so much importance in telling our stories, but there is also importance in working on where we are now and what we are, you know, what headspace we're in now and what we need to help each other now. Because the reality is, yeah, things have gotten better, but there is still, the struggle is still real and the erasure is still there, and the, you know, people invalidating our identities, it's still happening. So I think it's important for community-led people who comes from us, because this couldn't have been what it is if there weren't queer people involved at the top, as well as the performers. Like, it wouldn't have been the same. It has to be by us. So I'm definitely looking to just create spaces like Metro, like, you know, those organizations that give back to the community, because we need our spaces and no one's going to create them except from ourselves. So that's what, yeah. That's what.
And, Jamie, what have you got coming up?
Yeah, I mean, that was lovely, Jules. I was just going to say, I am working on a play at the moment. I'm directing a, I think someone mentioned it briefly before, I'm directing a trans-led production of Hamlet. And actually, majority of those people actually were found sort of friends I made in this production. So Jules was involved in the initial production that we were working on, and then Alexander, who you saw play the bishop in the documentary, is a leader of the creative team there. They're the dramaturg. So yeah, I'm making a all trans production, a trans-led production, I should say, of Hamlet, and that is going to be in a swimming pool. So yeah, there's going to be lots of people underwater and stuff like that. So that's really exciting. That's coming hopefully quite soon. But what with the pandemic and everything, it has been delayed quite a lot. And then alongside that, I also sort of I do a lot of work outside of theatre as well. I'm an interdisciplinary artist. So at the moment, I'm sort of working on a line of bio-teddies, which are handcrafted soft toys. Usually my art depicts something about the trans feminine experience. I'm really interested in curating a trans feminine sort of artistic sentiment. And so yeah, so my artwork is a lot about that. And personally, I'm starting hormone replacement therapy. And so I plan to sort of document that process in an artistic way. I plan to sort of, unpick a lot of the, there seems to be a lot, I don't know what's going on in the media at the moment. There seems to be lots of lies and fabrications about what it is to get hormones. And I'm really looking to sort of do activist artwork that sort of really comes to the truth of what it is to transition, because it's the media has it all wrong. And also, yeah, I think a huge part of me and Jules's work is about community, and is about sort of ensuring that all the art, the creative stuff that we do, it has a purpose behind it, and it has a backbone in community. So a lifelong project that I'm working on is building a trans commune. I plan to live outside of the government, because the way that they're dealing with things at the moment, we all know, is awful, and we're dealing with the biggest attack on trans rights to ever take place. It's happening right now. I can't stress that enough. There is no healthcare for trans children under the age of 16. That is a huge problem. I know that's going to be a huge problem for a lot of the kids that we were working with at Metro. You know, I won't. She couldn't be in the documentary for legal reasons, but there was an 11-year-old trans girl who was part of this project, and that was such a beautiful thing, to get to know an 11-year-old trans girl and see her be accepted, see her play someone like a Queen of England as a young Black trans girl. That was something that will stay with me forever, because it reminds me, in a time when the government is trying to tell me that those people don't exist, they do exist. They are beautiful, they are talented, and they were a joy to work with. And I know that for that girl in particular, that experience of doing this play will also be monumental for her. I mean, if I had someone when I was 11 telling me that I could be the Queen of England, you know, like, where would I be? You know, who knows? You know. So yeah, like that's what I've got going forward. Building community like links through art that reflects my trans experience. Yeah.
And to become the future Queen of England as well.
Yes, that's the goal.
Got to ask, have you got a bio teddy nearby for us to see?
My gosh. Ooh, have I got? No, because this is the thing. This is my problem. I always make them and then I give them away. Oh my gosh. But no, I don't. But I do have a teddy like in shot. If you want to see this, this is like just like one I got from my childhood. I love teddies. I think they're amazing because we like bestow personalities in them and then we hold them near to us. So yeah, but that's just like one from my childhood. But if you want to catch them, you can catch them on my Instagram, and that's at biogal_. So yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Ben and I'm going to mash in a few questions together. So obviously Jules and Jamie, they're going to create spaces. Ben, you're good at filling the space with voice, and the question here is one part is from Rachel Lennon, who's the co-project manager of the Queer Heritage Collections Network, and it's going to be, what is the legacy of this project? And another question from another voice is sort of, you know, what would be the follow-up for this? You know, where would we take the National Youth Theatre and English Heritage with, you know, something like this again?
Okay, I'll start with the latter. I'll start with the second question because I don't want to speak on behalf of Anna and Dominique, but seeing as the question has been directed to me, I know that National Youth Theatres and English Heritage's relationship is ongoing. I know that there is plans for another production. I do not know where it is though, so Dominique and Anna might need to help me answer this question. But telling Black stories, making a play kind of centred around the Black experience and Blackness in general, which I think is just testament to the bravery of this partnership. And I know bravery might sound a bit of a patronising word to use, but I do think that I'm just going to talk from the perspective of British theatre. You know, we can look at, I'm not going to name anyone because that would be a bit rude, but oh well. There are some organisations, there are some theatres, there are some companies who don't put action to the words that they speak. And I think it is testament to NYT for being, you know, a really fantastic collaborator and producing house. I became a member of NYT in 2014, and what I find quite moving is to see how much they've just made work that's gotten better as I've come through the company as an associate artist now. It's really it makes me feel proud to have come from NYT to see how much they're putting their money where their mouth is. I can't really think of a better way to put that. So in terms of what happens after this, you know, more work, I would love for our house to happen again and for people to see it in the flesh once we are able to get back to seeing theatre. And I think I could now divert into the first question about legacy, because I think there is something about the work, perhaps maybe, you know, I'm sure there are people who didn't see the production IRL who have, you know, joined us for this conversation who are desperate to see it. And I think the legacy, what I hope anyway, well, before I wrote this play, I'd only ever written very small plays on a small scale. I'd only written a solo show that was designed for a studio theatre. And then I went to then writing and collaborating with amazing people, this site-specific promenade piece that wasn't a proscenium arch. It was everywhere. Do you know what I mean? So I guess the legacy, I think, is hopefully inspiring every young person who was involved in this production and everyone who has hopefully been inspired by this evening, to think big. And I know that sounds a bit cringe, but you know, this year, 2020, the world we're living in, it's really hard. And I hear from so many people sometimes who are so full of self-doubt, and those people tend to be women or people who aren't white or queer people who are just so doubting of themselves. And I just think hopefully the legacy of all of this is for people to think big when it comes to their own creative endeavors, whatever they are, and that queer stories are pretty good stories. You know, ultimately this play was just a series of love stories, really, and everyone loved it, whether they were queer or straight or whatever, because we love seeing theatre that makes us feel seen. And I think everyone felt very seen, despite however they identified. So more of that work, more stories about love, and not just romantic love, you know, any kind of love, because it's important. Yes.
And I think as well, looking in the chat window, we've got to give a shout out to Henry VIII is in the audience. So
yeah,
say hello to James there as well.
James! I hope you're okay, James.
Hey, James.
Well, look, I'm wondering if we don't mind going a minute or two over. I would really like to just hear sort of like one last thoughts from each of the panelists about like what is the one takeaway that they'd like this audience to leave with today. Maybe if we could start with Jamie, as you're right in the center of my screen now already.
Sure. Okay, mine's just going to be short and sweet. Just, you like this, you want more, come get it. Come get it. That's all I'm going to say.
That's plenty. Jules, what about yourself?
I would say that anything is actually possible. You just have to do it, and we are all responsible for creating the change. We can't expect change and not be willing to change. So yeah, it starts at home, whether that home is a block or a palace.
Hear, hear. And Ben, what about yourself?
Mine sounds a little bit cryptic. It sounds a little bit sinister, and I promise it's not. But I always remember from this experience, Anna Niland once said to me when I was having another breakdown, she said, "Hold your nerve. Hold your nerve." And I think I remember, and I think about it every week. And I think you can interpret that however you want to. It's a tough time to be a human right now. It's perhaps a bit of a tougher time to be queer, as Jamie so eloquently described there for us. So whether it's merely existing or making art or just living, just hold your nerve. That's what I say. Yes.
Yeah, very, very wise, timely words, I think. Anna, what about yourself?
I suppose I think, the future is in the hands of our young people, and we need to give space. So all the spaces that that maybe English Heritage have, National Trust, whatever, don't be scared to allow young people to take that space, because the National Youth Theatre, we're only as brave as we can be because of the young people that we serve. We have to be brave because they're the voices, they're the future. And the process is the most important bit, because if you've got a brilliant process with the right partners, with the right people, and you're being an activist and you're holding your nerve, your product will be extraordinary.
And yeah, very true. And that's where the real richness lives, isn't it? It's within the people, and this is all about the people. And Dominique, where's last but very much not least?
Well, I have two things to say. One of them is that the Shout Out Loud program has been, I think it's made us braver as an organization. It's emboldened us to do, to challenge ourselves. And Shout Out Loud is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and none of this would be possible without their support. I want to make sure that that's really clear. We have brilliant partners in the program as well, consortium partners. The National Youth Theatre is one of them. But I think that bravery for me is encapsulated by the idea of empowering people to tell their own stories and trusting people to tell their own stories. you know, history and heritage belongs to everyone, and it's there to provide inspiration for people and provide inspiration for everyone. And we had a brilliant opportunity provided by, you know, this funding, by the will of the organization, the support from our senior management, our directors, in doing this, to give over that space and support these young people and give them what they need in terms of the history of this place to unlock its, to help them unlock its secrets, but then to give them the key. My metaphors are out of control, to continue doing that. And it's been incredible, and we want more. I would love to stage our house again at Eltham Palace. I think we need to. We have a project coming up at Portchester Castle that is about the Haitian Revolution. It's that play will happen in August. I hope you all buy tickets. And I hope it can all happen. That again will be an outdoor promenade performance, so it should be COVID safe. But this is about, but history is there for everyone to draw from. You know, we want to create, make it easy for people to access the richness that is there, and for them to process it in the way that they can. And heritage isn't about ancestry. You know, in the queer community, we understand probably really well, more than lots of people, that family is about chosen family as much, you know, if not more, than it is about who you're related to. And history and heritage is about chosen heritage. You get to pick the heritage that you want and have it be part of you. And these young people have demonstrated how powerful that can be when it's done and when it's supported. So I'm very humble in, you know, in the face of their amazing creativity and inspiring work. It's just been such a privilege from start to finish.
Well, I think I would, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to this really wonderful, generous spirited, open panel that we've had here, and everybody in the audience for engaging with this. And I think the thing I'm most left with is this idea that, yes, the place is hugely important, but the thing that really brings life to it is the people that come through it and the lives that they live, and that's the really important thing. And I also get a sense that if we are looking back to our past, it's not just about looking back into a dusty old past, it's about understanding who we are now and about really writing a future for everyone. And I just want to thank everybody for engaging in this, because you are writing the future as well as looking to the past. Thank you, everybody.
Wonderfully chaired. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.